so on, we came up with this tremendous utopian thinking, like we're going to make a new world. We're going to transform everything. And I sort of noted down some of my things. The philosopher Gurdjieff, he talked about creativity. And he says that we're going to unleash the creative spirit, and that's going to break us out of the prison of ordinary life, which is mighty tough. We're going to have this great surge of creativity. Now, he's saying this is before the revolution, before the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917. All the stuff I'm going to say here. They talked about art, the importance of art in transforming the world, not just to depict the world, but to transform it, to change the world. I think Marx stands behind a lot of this notion here. There was one guy in 1892 talked about this earth as being the cradle, but we were going to escape from this earth and we were going to travel to the moon. 1892, Russian author. This is going to be great. Scientific enterprise. We're going to have space travel. It's going to open up this new world to us. One philosopher's famous phrase was, the only truth that you're going to hang on to is this, that nothing on earth is impossible. This is under the Tsarist regime. Now, before the revolution, I think this is important. So they talked about this new mode of consciousness. You're going to have what they call the seventh dimension. You had the three space, three time dimensions, but the seventh dimension was the dimension of imagination, where you begin to see new possibilities. And in this new world, we're going to create this better system. And the people were going to do this. Gorky, there's Gorky Park in Moscow, to their author. Gorky, talking around the turn of the century, was talking about we must change the God seekers into God creators, into God builders. And he talked about the people being the almighty, immortal people. And he even had people at this time talking about overcoming death, that we would learn to overcome death. We would regenerate people. And they sort of had theories of how you were going to eat certain things and live almost forever and so on. And then Trotsky, who was involved in the whole revolution, eventually was assassinated, as you know, and so on. This was in 1925, before he fled the country. He said, now the human beings will raise themselves to a new plane to create a new Superman. This is what's going to happen in this revolution. We're going to have a new Superman. We're going to be, I'm quoting now, stronger, wiser, and subtler. Our body will be more harmonized. Our movements will be more rhythmical. Our voice will be more musical. And the average human being will rise to the heights of Aristotle, Goethe, and Marx. 1925, Trotsky. This is the dream that was alive as part of before the revolution and then as part of the revolution. And one of the theories is that what Lenin did was able to capitalize on that, these apocalyptic expectations, this sense that we're on the wave of something new. One of the theories is that Lenin was successful because he captured that and said, we can go with this, that's right, we can make all of this happen, we can create this new world. And it was, tremendously invigorating. It was a dream that moved people. Stalin, comes along, and what he does fundamentally is, and you get the critique of, interesting in the Soviet Union, how Stalin, you read this in the paper, Stalin is the bad guy, and you can't say enough bad things about Stalin. I mean, he's the one who messed everything up. He collectivized the farms. He purged everybody. He, got rid of the intellectuals. He created these horrible-looking buildings in Moscow. They make fun of the buildings built during the Stalin era, ugly architecture and so on. Just common because he's really the bad guy. But what he did fundamentally was make a religion out of Leninism. No, that's right. On Red Square, they have the mausoleum to Lenin. Joseph Stalin was a seminarian at one time. And the feeling is he had a sense of religion. But he rejected the Christian religion and set up another one. He had to have symbols. So he sets up Lenin's tomb. He makes it a shrine. You make a pilgrimage to Lenin's tomb. I guess, I really didn't get inside there, but others, I guess he's buried or is in a position just like they put the saints in the cathedrals and so on. He became the saint. So you have a quasi-religion, and we said that all along. Marxism, Leninism became a religion. And, of course, it was used to destroy the spirit and all. Well, it's this dream that captured people. Jean-Paul Sartre in the 50s in Paris, great existentialist philosopher, and great freedom, all of this, would not condemn Stalin and his purges, even when they knew about it. In other words, there were intellectuals around the world, United States included, that could saw the Soviet Union as the harbinger of the dream. This is going to be the new society. It's like a lot of people thought of Nicaragua that way in the recent past when the Sandinistas took over. This is finally the triumph of socialism. Finally we'll see that this is the way you're supposed to organize life. And the intellectuals around the world, many bought into this. There's a great debate now about Sartre and why he thought that way, and why he wasn't critical of Stalin when it was known what he was doing to people. Why would the intellectuals not see this and criticize him? It was like why Karl Barth didn't condemn the invasion of Hungary by the Soviet Union. He refused to say anything about it. Karl Barth, great Protestant theologian. Reinhold Niebuhr in the United States castigated Barth. Why can't you criticize those people? I mean, do they do everything right? Can't there be something wrong? And can't you be critical of them? And I'm linking it to this whole dream idea. This utopian thinking that we're finally going to straighten the world out, we're going to feed everybody, we're going to be equality, we're not going to have all the abuses of capitalism, and so on. And that's what's dead. Walk in, the guy says, of course, we have to turn to the free market. We all know that. Of course, the whole system is messed up. Of course, the whole thing doesn't work. This is the dream of the 20th century shattered. And that seems to me to create this cultural kind of problem for them in the spirituality. The question is, where would they get the dream? I don't think you can function without it. I don't think you can make the changes without it. And I tried to tell them that. One possibility that seems to me to be in their culture is the Christian religion, Russian Orthodox religion, which is woven into their culture, and that's what I'm going to talk about next week. But for now, it's a matter of saying that the dream is dead, and therefore the spirituality is in trouble. And I think that's the sense of ennui that you feel in the people, the sense of, it's not going to change. Nothing's going to work. The 5 years of Gorbachev. Well, how come you people like Gorbachev? How come you people are so in the West are so enamored of Gorbachev? Even Father Václav Malý told me the same thing. I'm going on praising Gorbachev, and he says, "You got it all wrong, man. This is not right. Gorbachev, don't trust him. Do not trust this man." So they don't understand why in the West we think we have to prop up Gorbachev, and because simple things. One young lady said tennis is in the Soviet Union. Golf is not. I went to the one golf course in Moscow. Golf is not in it. One golf course in the Soviet Union. I hit a few balls just to check it out. But the tennis is in. That's nice if you could get a tennis racket. She's telling you the trouble she went through to get a tennis racket. You just don't walk into the athletic store and say, well, I like that racket. I'll take that one. And that's what she says. She doesn't like Gorbachev. He can't get tennis rackets. Not only that, he can't get food. He can't get anything. Except you have to wait. So it's the dream, I see the dream is being in trouble. And then, now I want to take a break, but then I want to come back and look at some questions. But then, what that does for me, where stands it with the American dream? What about our culture? If it's true, I mean, you start to get a perspective, maybe something about how healthy is our dream, and what is it, and how does it function. Let's take a 5-minute break. And one night he was complaining to his staff about breakfast, that they kept getting the same thing for breakfast. And the next day, they changed the breakfast menu. I mean, they just assumed that everything was bugged. They said they worked on that premise in the hotels, that everything was bugged. Baccarat Maurice told me his room was just obviously bugged. We didn't hide it. They put it up there. And they had a camera right outside his room. So everybody that came in was photographed. Just, you know, he didn't hide it. Just, he knew you were photographed as you came in. Yeah. Well, because it has Gorbachev and Father Maurice saying you couldn't trust him and so on, and why? Is there an explanation? The explanation we've heard was along the time, well, he's just doing this to save himself. I mean, he's just making these, concessions one by one because he's forced to. Doesn't have a vision about it. He's forced to do it, and he just keeps responding to circumstances that way. And he can't stay in power if people aren't eating, so he's got to figure out a way to feed them. That's about what I heard. I mean, I didn't hear anything that I found compelling that changed my mind. The thing they did say, I tried out my theory on a number of people about Gorbachev, the similarity between Gorbachev and Pope John the 23rd. In fact, I tried to probably the brightest guy in the memo. And I told him about my brilliant theory of that Gorbachev is like John the 23rd. There's tremendous parallels. They come up through the system, and by some, stroke of genius or something, they inexplicably rise above the system. Inexplicably, just totally rise above the system, which, in history has happened so seldom. And then, once they're above the system and they inaugurate these changes and so on, they're constantly faced with the bureaucracy. Like the Pope always had to try to placate the Syria. And he would do odd things like, totally out of character, like say, well, we got to have Latin in the seminary. After giving all this openness, and then you have a encyclical saying, got to have Latin in the seminary, or something, and you knew what was happening there. This was his placation of the right wing. You give him this, but he's going to get more someplace else. And that's how I was seeing Gorbachev. Well, this fellow did not buy this. My brilliant preacher. And he says Gorbachev does not rise above the system as much as you think. And then he went on to explain he studied in Moscow in 55, 56, University of Moscow. And at that time, there were intellectuals who were talking along this line. And that he would have been, what happened is that he veered into it. It wasn't his creative ideas, but he was taken by it. And what was happening is there was people all over the system like this, who also were getting educated by these advanced thinkers and were buying into this in some way, and that he then recognized these similarities. He was able to give voice to what a lot of people were already thinking. So this man is trying to tell me that I'm putting Gorbachev up too high and giving him too much credit for his creativity, etc. And that what he was really responding to was currents that are already there. I don't know the truth of the matter, but that was his line. No, I also tried that. I had hoped to meet with Mrs. Gorbachev, and as I had tried to contact her, and she has a doctorate in philosophy, that's right. And I wrote her a letter and said that I thought we had a lot of common interests, and that I would like to get together with her. I figured a lunch with her. But I never heard from Raisa. Very disappointing. And I asked the Amimo people when I got there, and I think I made a mistake. I asked a lower echelon person first, that of trying to arrange a meeting with Mr. Gorbachev, and he said not possible. But I never took it to the higher people. I just let it go. I think I tried my theory out that she's influential on some people, and I think that they didn't buy that either. That's an intuition I've had, that she is influential, but they don't see it that way. I mean, they put much more stress on the University of Moscow State University, and the intellectual currents that were there already in the system. That seems to be their big explanation of where Gorbachev got out of this. In other words, I figure, I see him as a man of tremendous vision, and, a philosophy that just rises almost totally above the general populace, and the bureaucrats, and the educated people. I mean, that's how I've seen him all along. I think of him as one of the great people who's ever lived. You get a very different view over there. That's the other side. Yes, I mean, they took to that. Morality, ethical side, yes. That seemed to impress them. And they wanted to talk more about that. And they would use that word, that's what we've forgotten, or we have to raise up that dimension. See, get back to Lenin. I didn't finish that critique yet, but what I think is going to happen now is that we're going to start seeing a critique of Lenin in Russia. And that's almost unheard of. I mean, Red Square down at this listed picture of Lenin, the mausoleum, the tomb. I mean, Stalin made a god almost out of Lenin. And so I just begin to get the bits and pieces. It's in vogue to criticize Stalin, and the standard line is Lenin had it right, and everything would have been fine, but Stalin messed it all up. We still get back to Lenin. Now, one of the doctors at the University he spent a lot of time with really was big on Lenin. I mean, he says Lenin is, the greatest and thinker and brilliant man, and he's on target. That was one line of thought. In fact, one of the questions in the group to our economists was, what do economists in the United States think of Lenin? And he said a big gulp. And I give him a lot of credit. He said, and I watched the faces. It was the most interesting facial reactions. And he said, well, economists in the United States don't even think of him as an economist. We don't talk about him at all. And there's a couple of people in the front who I thought they were going to fall off their chairs. They couldn't really fathom that. I don't know what a parallel would be. It's like if you said to a Russian Orthodox, well, what do you think about St. John the 23rd? And they say, well, we don't think anything of it. There's nothing. I don't know. I'm looking for a parallel that would have such striking value. And then I saw in some faces sort of a smile creep in, like, you're right. Thought. But it was the most obvious crowd reaction is when he made that just bald statement, I don't think much of Lenin. But the man that we were closest to, spent a lot of time with, talked about, he was very offended in a way by that and saw that Lenin is, one of the greatest thinkers in history and having good ideas on almost everything and so on. I picked up, no one was saying this real loudly, but I could just get from some of the other thinkers that, no, it's Lenin who's wrong. And Lenin's going to, I think within the next year position we will start to see critiques of Lenin. And the critique, I think, is going to go something like this, that Lenin had no morality. For Lenin, there was no criterion by which to make judgments over the party and over the leader of the party. There's no higher criterion. That meant that morality was effectively dictated by a dictator. I think that's one of the theses that's propounded is that Stalin simply took Lenin and carried it out to its natural consequence. That as soon as you took away any religious sense, any higher authority, any thought of a natural law or a church guidance in what you were going to do, and you made the party the supreme thing, and the big thing for the party was to get power, and then was great at organizing that, and you had this system in place. And all Stalin did was take it and run with it. And so I think that's going to be the next thing. That it's not Stalin that had it wrong, it's Lenin that had it wrong. It's right on the question of morality. And the question of spirituality and morality. And I think that's what Gorbachev keeps hinting at all the time. He didn't say it directly, but you must bring up the moral spiritual dimension. You cannot have economic reform. He said it explicitly without transforming, as he calls, the spiritual world. I don't know exactly what that means, but that's a phrase that he uses. And so Lenin, I think, that's my own opinion too of Lenin. I mean, Lenin had it wrong. That's why he had human nature wrong. Yes. Constant theme from all sides on Lithuania that I heard, both, from everybody we talked to, was they should go slow. The image that the one Russian used, he says, the Lithuanians are like a little child in a house. The house is now on fire, and the parents have to attend to that, and the little child is demanding attention and wants something. That's the image that one of the Soviet intellectuals used to describe the situation in Lithuania. And that was very common. I mean, we got that from all sides, even from Americans who were commenting on the situation. That the feeling was that Lithuania would get everything they wanted. And Gorbachev, all he's asking is, let us go through a process. He talks about a 5-year process. And it's not going to make any difference to them. I mean, they're going to get what they want. The common feeling was that, there's no bonds with those people. I mean, they were taken over during the Second World War. And they can't have pluralism. That was one of my topics as well, pluralism, which I really didn't get a chance to develop. But their pluralism is very different from ours. And they're faced with this tremendous difference in thought. The Lithuanians hate the Russians. When the Nazis came into Lithuania, they saw them as liberators. And when the Nazis were driven out, they were deathly afraid. They were so much more afraid of the Russians than the Nazis. In fact, I mean, we got people in this city here who told me the story of how when the last train that the Nazi soldiers going out, they piled up the bodies of the Nazi soldiers going out of Vilnius, and to try to take them back where the Russian army was coming in, and these Lithuanians, so fearing the Russians, threw off the bodies off the train and put themselves there, the last train out of Vilnius, so they would avoid the Russians. So there's this historical antithesis that's just tremendous between them. Now, in Gorbachev, the theory that we were told is that Gorbachev knows that. Gorbachev has got no problem with that, and he knows they have to be independent. He hopes to have economic links with them, but he knows they have to have political independence. But he just wants them to go at a pace and to go slowly. And it seemed like that was the line that people were advancing. I've even heard the Lithuanians say that this is they're going to be better off if they will just go with his pace. It's not going to make any difference. They're going to get what they want, and they're not going to get it any sooner the other way. Common thought we heard. Well, my application to this was to look at the American dream. I think it's true that every culture has a dream about itself and its place in the great scheme of things. And while they couldn't understand my talk of the American civil religion, I think it's because they don't know their own history. Because in the Soviet Union, you have that same thing. You have the sense that their Christian Orthodox religion was the pure religion. And it was the Latinized West that got messed up. They have the pure religion. And that they have Mother Russia. In Mother Russia, this is a sacred land for them. The land protects them. That's why eventually people can't conquer them because the land is too vast. Like Hitler got the monuments. You drive into Moscow from the airport, and they got these great big, what are they, like crosses like this, where it's as far as the Nazi army got. Stopped right there. Couldn't get into Moscow. And it's the land protects us. Well, they get their own sense of being saved. I found that in a number of ways, but they don't seem to be aware of that. We've got our American dream then, and it's got a great exclusivity about it, as you know. It's got a sense like we're God's chosen people, we got it right, our culture's better than every other culture, our way is the right way to do it. And that, it seems, begins to be critiqued. Okay, that is, in our minds, equal opportunity. Now, that's what we stand for. Now, what happens in our own time to that beautiful American dream, it's always going to be better. I'm going to work hard, and my kids are going to go to get a higher education. They'll get out and make more money. They'll have a higher standing of living. Every time it's gone along like that. We're the good people, etc. This is the place to be. God's the promised land. But we got our own ways the dream gets cut into, don't we? We got consciousness raising about the way the blacks are treated in the United States. Selma, Bernie Boff telling me that Selma, March of Selma, that changes consciousness about many things. And saw things in a different way. For many whites in the United States, it wasn't until then that the American dream in one way would touch them. Some people saw the movie Little Big Man, and you begin to see how the Indians are treated. The Indians are sitting there talking about the barbarians that are attacking us. The Indians are saying, how are these people going to take the land? How can you take the land? It's like taking the air. So we begin to think, how have the Indians been treated in the United States? Then we get a feminist critique. And we begin to say, well, why is it that women doing comparable work are making less money? Where's this American dream? Then we got black teenage unemployment. Then we got Watergate. And then we got Vietnam, which we're still trying to sort out. And then we got questioning government policies, Iran-Contra. It seems like one thing after another cuts into the American dream. And you begin to wonder, is there a glue there that holds our culture together? Is there a dream that really galvanizes people? Is there something for young people to look forward to? What do you tell blacks in the ghetto with 45% unemployment? How do you deal with that? Even our young people now, it's just not so clear that the world's going to be better for them. A lot of our graduates, can they really get a job, etc. That has to be, we have to do our negative critique of the American dream and come to terms with that. And again, I'm back to the same answer myself that I would have for the Soviets. You cannot make your final dream be a nationalistic dream. The nation state can't bear that. One of the things that Václav Milý said to me, I get the name wrong because I was walking around Prague looking for Václav Milý. Until some person I asked, Václav Milý? No. About an hour later, this lady said to me, you don't mean Václav Milý, do you? The very one. Anyway, I still have trouble with him. But one of the things he told me was very involved in the rising against the communists and the demonstrations, very politically involved. And he told me it became a temptation to power, a temptation to identify with one political movement, and he backed off. Had to back off and move back into a critiquing posture. So maybe today he's very like this with Havel, the president. But he needs to keep distance from him. Even he would have to, now he didn't speak it, not his words, but he would eventually even have to say to Havel, maybe you're not on track. So what you get down to, it seems to me, is that we can't make a culture work. We can't have a viable spirituality if it's nationalistic, if it's tied to one political system or one economic system. And so we're back to saying that in Russia, what I think the roots are that they could draw on is in Russian Orthodoxy. And what we in the United States, seems to me, at least for us gathered here, is back to the Christian tradition, broader the Judeo-Christian tradition, which gives us the vision of the kingdom. The kingdom, somehow we've got to get that cause of God and the kingdom to be the thing that motivates us, that keeps the dream alive. You've got to have hope. But what's the hope? Is it in a 5-year plan, like Stalin said? Is it in perestroika finally? Or is it in labor unions in the United States? And I think the final spiritual answer, the Christian answer is no. Finally, the hope is in God. It's in the kingdom. And that makes one a critic of any system. Finally, that's what's going to allow them to maybe criticize Lenin. And to say, Leninism should not be a religion. In our lifetime, they'll tear that mausoleum down in Red Square. And take his body out of there and pull the picture down on Red Square. It's an interesting question, isn't it? To critique all the idols. The idols of the United States dream, American dream, or the Russian dream. Well, I think that's where it takes a global perspective on spirituality. Says something like it's finally the kingdom, the reign of God, the cause of God that ought to galvanize us and get us into action, make us critical of the culture as we see it. Let's take a couple minutes of questions. We're not going to go forever, but let's set a time limit, like 10 after or something. Yeah. There's a tremendous religious revival in Russia right now. I want to talk about that next week. I don't want to say much about it now. It's amazing. Yes. And it's happening among the young people. Of course, for a Ranierian theologian, this is not surprising at all. I've been saying this for years. The same thing will happen in China. There's a reason for it. There's an absolute reason that is human beings are religious species. That's what Marx didn't know that, and Lenin didn't know it, and Stalin didn't know it. We're religious creatures. We have an impulse for the transcendent, and it's going to come out. It will come out. And there's just no doubt. I have stories of some of the people I met, simpler people along that line that I want to talk about next week. I mean, just corroborate that. And it's not surprising. It's going to happen. It will happen in China. There will be a religious revival in China, or any communist country, or any repressive system. You got to get and what I learned, one of the things I come away from the Soviet Union again with is, you got to get the anthropology right. You got to know what human nature is. If you don't have human nature right, you're going to get wrong along the line. Lenin didn't have it right, and that's why they're all screwed up. It's simple in my mind. If you don't understand human nature, you don't have an adequate anthropology, you'll get it wrong. The system, the politics, the economics will get messed up. And that's a hard sell. I mean, a lot of people had a really long arguments with an economist about that, who wouldn't buy that, and just said, no, the economy doesn't have anything to do with morality and with, there's nothing to do with culture, ethics, nothing. It's an economic positivism. Economics has its own mathematical rules. It's got nothing to do with all the rest of it. I just don't buy that. I think if you look through history of thought, when people got the anthropology wrong, they screwed up down the line. And that's why the Christian message is so important. It reminds us we're spiritual creatures. Forget that, it won't work.
So Union works through whatever it is going to work through the next 5, 10, 20 years. Were there any comments, I think, especially like on the evangelical people, especially background in political, and what kind of American public policy position either help the Soviet Union move in a constructive direction, or I think make the whole process a lot more complicated? Up at all discussion with
yeah, an informal discussion. It didn't come up directly in the conference. Because I remind you, the premise was we were not going there to lecture them, but it was a brilliantly conceived conference to accomplish two goals. In other words, all we did was go and say, this is what we do. But it had the byproduct of they're sitting there thinking, what do we do? It was just brilliant, in my opinion, the way it was done. But in terms of the practical politics, I think in our delegation there was talk, almost universal sense, we must keep Gorbachev in power. That what we have to do, and we had people from different parts of the political spectrum. Most people were saying Bush has got it right on Lithuania. That he's on target, that, he just can't support Lithuania. There's larger geopolitical things. We can't recognize them. He's right in doing that. And that the larger geopolitical questions have to be solved, and Lithuania will be better off in the long run. If Gorbachev goes and the right wing takes over, Lithuania is in much worse shape than it is now. And there are tanks on the streets and so on. So I would say that there was a general feeling that Bush is on target with his policy on that particular question. Support Gorbachev, try to move towards. Unless you can't keep doing business in the Soviet Union until the ruble floats on the market, world market. It's impossible. You can't barter forever. There's only so much vodka there. To take out. Only so much. That's actually how business is done, bartering. The Japanese, and all these people, this whole conference that we were at, the talk was always about joint ventures. Everyone wants joint ventures. That means our businesses would come in and work with these people. And together set up different, produce various goods. But they got to produce goods. to produce things for the stores, and so people can buy. People, the story is they got rubles. There's a lot of rubles. A lot of ordinary people got money. It doesn't do them any good. You can't do anything with it. You can't buy anything. So that's what we received Gorbachev in power, and trying to move to a situation where we really do, can interact with them economically. I would say that's as much as I got on it. The fellow that I met in Prague was John Sears, the former head of the Republican Party. And John seemed to know a lot and be in the in, and he was the one, I didn't mention by name before, but said that, gave me the analysis that if Gorbachev, we shouldn't be so tied to Gorbachev, he said, that if Gorbachev goes, it'll swing left and not right. And and he's the one who made the comments about the right being in disarray. And then it was later that I read in one of the international papers about the junior officers in the army being supportive of Gorbachev. And so the military split. So you can't just count, like Ligatov couldn't just count on the army supporting him if he tried to take over power. Last one. Yeah. No. The question is, is this conceivable? Well, I was trying to get a sense of that from the economists and so on. They can make laws, and they probably are. They're drafting them now. I think on May 10th, I might have this on, I think they're supposed to try to work through something by May 10th that the memo people were writing for them. And it's a question whether Gorbachev would buy it and then whether he could sell it and so on. I don't know that. But the answer is, yes, they could do this. They've got models of various places. Like Poland is trying to move in this direction now. And so there's indications that some people can do it. You got a question of education, whether people can really be motivated to do it, and how you would overcome all the bureaucrats who don't want it to happen, etc. I think the answer is yes, they can make the laws. They've already tried to fudge it. There's these loopholes that these people get in these joint ventures get around. I met some of these Soviet business people. They walk around giving you their card all the time. You feel like you're in a corporate headquarters or something. Anybody wants to get a joint venture? We had a big American businessman with us too that is trying to get involved with them, and they're very leery. They can't just jump in here. There's many things that have to change before they could get into these joint ventures. But that seems to be their big hole. One guy, he's giving me his card, he's in copper. He's sitting on a lot of copper up in Siberia. And all he wants me to help him, find somebody who's going to work with him on this copper business. He owns it. He can't own anything, but he owns the copper.
Comment on the inevitability of a spiritual renewal in the United States and a kind of reform. There is learn and job description and the inevitability of the failure of American dream.
No. We've had, Bernie, as you know, in the history of the United States, various religious awakenings and great revivals of religion in the United States periodically. One theory is that we're in one now. It's taking, they're often strange forms and so on, but you walk around this campus and see the various Christian groups that meet, for example, and how many there are, and numbers of people. One gets a sense of that. I think there'll always be pendulum swings. A lot of it depends on the culture. That's why there's a dialectical relationship, I think, as you suggest, between the American dream and the culture, what's happening in the culture, and the religious revival. And I think when you're in a cultural situation of confusion and chaos and disintegration, which I think in many ways we are now, I expect to see the religious revival. And I think we might be on the edge of it. not like it just fall off. I think you see it in a lot of ways. But it often has strange links. I mean, I think you can see the fundamentalist movement in the United States right now in that light. It's a reaction against the insecurity of the failure of the American dream or other cultural props there are. And you need security, and religion looks good that way. I think we have to critique that. So I'd say the answer is yes, and we're already in it. And what needs to happen is it needs to be refined and guided and so on. Well, I think it's a nice time to stop. I'm going to be here again next Tuesday and talk about, I think, more about I forget what the topic is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It does say American work ethic and the Russian Orthodox contemplative spirit. So it might talk about Russian Orthodoxy and so on. I hope to see you next week. Bring a friend.